Good afternoon, and thank you for having me on your show. Yes, indeed, we did receive a response, albeit a bit later than we had requested. The Office of the State Attorney replied and said that at this point they acknowledge receipt of our letter and that they would consult with their clients and revert in due course. We have obviously since then placed them on terms, and we expect a further, more detailed response from them during the course of this afternoon. However, we have not stopped our preparations in as far as proceeding with our court application, and we're busy finalizing our papers, and we will shortly be ready to serve those papers on government. Obviously, that will be dependent on the response that we do receive from the Office of the State Attorney.
Yeah, Sinenhlanhla, I just want to take, of course, this matter back to context in terms of, why you're even taking this legal route in the first place against the government. For anyone watching for the first time, I mean, I know that, as an industry, you believe that the sale of cigarettes should commence. Why is that so?
Look, I mean, just to take you a bit back in as far as, where this issue started. When the lockdown period was announced and it eventually came into place on the 27th of March this year, we, together with many other industry bodies, were concerned because what happened is that the regulations themselves were silent in as far as the issue relating to the sale of cigarettes. The regulations made mention of essential goods being sold, and essential goods were then broken down into 5 subcategories, of which basic goods was one. So we wrote to government, based on this to say, listen, we see clarity as to whether cigarettes are permitted to be sold or not. Obviously, it was then announced by Minister Ibrahim Patel that the sale of cigarettes would not be permitted. What then followed is that we then, for the next 3 weeks during the lockdown period, attempted to engage government to advance reasons as to why we believe they should be sold, and also the benefits that allowing or permitting the sale of cigarettes would present in as far as the economy is concerned. Government sort of touched on the issue and said, look, they were considering it, and that they would revert. But every time we received a response, it was in the negative. So we eventually took the decision to say, look, cigarettes are still being sold. The regulations, as far as we're concerned, in terms of our interpretation, permit the sale of cigarettes, and the interpretation, the so-called law that's been bandied about is merely an interpretation of certain cabinet ministers, which we feel is incorrect. And we are now approaching a court to say, listen, you have the power to interpret these regulations, and we are now calling upon you as obviously the custodian of law to interpret these regulations so that there's no further ambiguity as far as concerned. You'll recall that, for instance, the Western Cape government, provincial government, had made a similar argument.
So, Sinenhlanhla, perhaps at the start it may not have been spelled out that the sale of cigarettes is not permitted during the lockdown. But in your reading of, the list of essential and basic goods, do you consider cigarettes to be essential and basic goods?
What we're saying, is that in as far as the application of the law, if you're going to then consider, for instance, items such as sweets, chocolates, and other items which are sold at retail stores that citizens are permitted to attend to during this lockdown period, we feel that you cannot then obviously distinguish between those particular items and cigarettes. And the Act in itself is not exclusive. It does not have an implicit sort of exclusion of cigarettes. The only item that it is expressive on is alcohol. So in essence, that is the case that we're putting forward.
Yeah, we're running out of time, but I just want to slot this question in before I let you go, Sinenhlanhla, and perhaps you can give me a brief answer. We've already seen the response by the president to the Gauteng Liquor Forum when they, in turn, had asked him to respond at a certain time while they were trying to, of course, to lift that ban against, the sale of alcohol. Should you meet the same fate as an organization? I mean, what would be your next steps? Because we've seen the president as well as the National Command Council being quite strict with their stance in terms of not lifting or amending any restrictions, particularly when it comes to cigarettes and alcohol.
Look, obviously, as and when we go along, we will have to weigh up our options. I mean, you also understand that the president is making an announcement, but we are not intent on sort of entertaining any delays from the state side. And obviously, we've given them a deadline, and should that deadline not be adhered to, we are ready to launch our court application. So we're ready at this stage to take this matter on.
All right, Sinenhlanhla Mnguni from the Fair Trade Independent Tobacco Association, giving us a sense there of some of the arguments that they'll be advancing as they continue to lobby, including planning to go to court around the issue of the ban on the sale of cigarettes.